We now move on to the discussion panel with Professor S.M. Joshi as chairperson. I request Dr. Alok Pandey to join the panel and Martha also to come over and join the panel. The chairperson may give some introductory remarks regarding the topic and moderate the discussion and invite questions as and when needed. And we have time till 12:45. Thank you.
Uh, the topic that has been given for the discussion is science and spirituality. The whole setup of the morning session is starting out with science and then spirituality and some kind of synthesis of science and spirituality. If we are to synthesize science and spirituality, then we must have a real synthesis rather than a juxtaposition or an antagonism between science and spirituality. There are two views in this. Science and spirituality in the Western world as an antagonism, as an antagonist parts, antagonist forces of the history are coming from the West. Because in the 8th century to 12th century, we had clash of civilizations, the religious wars, and later on came the intellectual development in France, of which there were many people who Descartes and others who started and rejected the religionism and developed reason. Out of this development of reason came the science, and religion was relegated to a second place, and therefore the ultimate of religion, that is spirituality, was completely antagonized. So now that science has come to an age and understood that ultimate reality he cannot grasp, and therefore there is a juxtaposition, there is an antagonism between science and spirituality, and some kind of debate is being considered in the debates that we have. In India, we have a totally different view. In India, the ultimate science is the spiritual science, but this science develops at different levels in a different way. And science at the physical level is not considered to be an antagonist of the spirituality in India, but it can include, because the ultimate spirituality or ultimate science of spirituality can develop various ways at various levels. Of course, the spirituality is at the spirit level. At the mind level, you can have something else. You can have at a pranic level, you can have something else. And at the physical level, you have science. So science and spirituality in India is not looked upon, historically even, as an antagonist forces, but an inclusive. The science can include into the spirituality, and ultimate science of everything is the spirituality. I think I can now say the two questions that are given. What is the nature and extent of the inspiration and influence of Sri Aurobindo's vision of spirit and matter on science and scientists? What are the possibilities and prospects of bridging science and spirituality? I now give it to you.
Dr. Joshi, your comments as you open the panel, plus the question that you raised, I think for me the two combine into one. And if you'd like, if you permit me, I'd like to respond to both of them as one because I think they're totally interrelated. The ancient Indian, I won't use the word spiritual because I'm afraid we are giving it too many definitions out of the box. Forgive me. I'll use the word consciousness with a capital C. Taking the Vedantic tradition, not the Shankarite and the Mayavadic or the Buddhist for the moment. There was a supreme consciousness, however you say it, consciousness for Satchitananda at the origin. of creation. And there was a clear gradation which was brought out in the earlier conversations in the morning from that harsh consciousness to the world of manifestation and through gradations of subtle matter to the sthul matter, right? All the science of ancient India, there was a lady who talked about Ayurveda in the morning, or any, including surgery, metallurgy, everything came from that lineage of knowledge and experience. Secrets of matter, its elements, all the tantric knowledge, for instance, the combination of elements, putting them together, and their effective practical use on humankind or the physical environment. That was one approach. The other, the West has followed. You have rightly, Dr. Joshi, spoken about the duality that existed in the world of European thought. They've had a constant problem between science and religion. We don't have it in India because we don't have religion. We have consciousness and experience of the reality. We don't have a formal religion, we don't have a church, we don't have a priest class, we don't have ritual and dogma and credo. Religion is a word we use for Hinduism wrongly because we are used to using the English language. There is no such thing as a religion in the context of Indian experience. It is not to say anything except a clarification which is purely of language, purely of language. In India, you use the word yoga, you use dharma, you use sadhana, or they are totally others. But the word religion is like secularism. We have transposed from the one language and experiential body into another, and it's inappropriate. It's something we should someday, maybe another work for Anand to sort out. They have had this battle. We know the problems that the early scientists had to go through at the hand of the religionists in Europe. Now that science has moved into, let me say, a more subjective domain through psychology, all the changes that have taken place in the last century, then the findings of physics and biology, they are nonplussed. My own understanding through interaction with my colleagues in the Western world is that they do not know what to do. They discover a whole of energy in matter. What do they call it? How do they term it? And the consciousness studies with this phrase have been increasing in the Western world for the last 30, 40 years. Sri Aurobindo and the mother come at the beginning of the 20th century. Sri Aurobindo has his early education in England. Born in India, early education there, at a time when England was going through the whole of the continent was going through some very powerful ideas in evolution and intuitive processes, which had not existed earlier. He comes back here. Mother comes from Egypt, Turkey, but born and brought up in France, comes to join Sri Aurobindo in India to work here. You see the canvas of richness, of experience and elements of human endeavor which they combine. And at the moment, I travel around a certain amount and I've always had links, I think, with European thought and culture. There is a powerful need of the work done by the physicist, by the reductionist method, in his laboratory on matter, and the results that he has found, and the work done right through the century with the lineage to the ancient past of India on consciousness. One needs the other to make a whole of life and action and mutation possible. The West is stranded. India is also stranded. But I meet a lot of young people from the West, I meet a lot of young people from India, and I find that by birth, almost genetically, they seem to have something of that combination. The Westerner as much as the Indian, as though the time of division is not there. And by birth, without having read anything, without having studied it, they seem to know how to handle life and the world very well. Look at all these youngsters. And the West, have a sense of something deeper. I see to them. So, and Shabindo's last word, I don't like quoting like Binu because we've been brought up at a time when mother really told us not to. She really told us. She could have told others something else. I don't know. She said, live it if you can. If you can't, okay, don't. But what do you think? Others can read the book. His last words, these are his words, the time has come to heal the division between life and spirit, like you said. And in this, I think the whole of humanity comes into the picture, and so does science and consciousness. Spirituality, again, is a corollary of the term religion. It has, in India, you have the word adhyatmikta. Adhyatmikta is something lived. It's experiential. So unless you add those words, the words, I mean, using another language, you can't transpose the experience. Thank you.
I think the two questions about the inspiration and influence of Sri Aurobindo on science and the future of science we have already touched upon, and it will be good to have some question, but I have only one concern which I share with everyone, that while it's very nice, there's so many levels we are progressing, but a fundamental progress that needs to be made is what is our true identity. Because on one side we have a structure of civilization built by the mind and technology, and it's really vast, it's an empire in its own right. But it's at whose disposal? Because if it remains at the disposal of the ego-ridden, desire-driven human consciousness, then the very same structure. There have been civilizations in the past. We have records in India of the age of Mahabharata. We have Atlantis, lost memories of a whole civilization which was much more developed scientifically from an occult point of view. So what we are really discovering now is not something new, it's a rediscovery. Sri Aurobindo speaks about it. And perhaps there were much more which was already discovered, which may yet discover tomorrow. For instance, developing nuclear technology on the point of an arrowhead, I think that would be something fantastic. I mean, if at all, and integrating occult science and physical matter. This has been done, and it is bound to be done with a greater richness in the coming years. But a crucial question is that if our identity and our vision remains purely anthropomorphic or anthropocentric, it will collapse. So let's hope that as we develop, we also develop a truer and a deeper self-identity, not merely related to our being this or that, religion or caste, creed, nationality, etc. Not even this or that, I am a scientist or a philosopher. Not even that I am a human being, because that's where our ultimate identity stops. But to be bold enough to declare with the rishis of the Vedas that one has discovered that oneness which is behind all creation. It's that fact, by living that and by discovering that immortal essence in us, that we can truly make the big leap. And the human race, from purely being a mental and intellectual age to enter into a age of progressive psychicization. So I suppose that is what is much more pressing and important. And if that happens, then any amount of science and technology will develop and will be safe. But otherwise, it will be a question of nuclear warheads in the hand of Taliban. That is also the other side of science. So we must not forget that while all this is very beautiful, we have age of globalization where space has collapsed. Very nice. We also have an age where I don't know my next door neighbor, also thanks to science. And it can go to absurd levels, like when I was sitting here, I got a phone call and I looked at the number and it's Anand Bhai calling. So, so we can become totally disconnected, and it's a fact. I mean, I do it all the time. So, while it's linking us at one level, it's like communism linked that tried to link us at a material level, at a very biological level. We are all animals. That's one kind of unification. But the true unification comes that we are all essentially I'm a little afraid now to use the word spiritual, but I mean it in the fullest, deepest, and truest sense of the word. We are all spiritual beings, and we are having a human experience, as Teilhard de Chardin said. And we have to ascend out of that into something higher, deeper, and truer, that which we are. This is what I feel like adding to what has already been said. Atis Bhai, please.
The issues that we are dealing with are exceedingly complex, and so it is difficult to put something up in a few words. But the previous speakers actually have put up, I think, the key elements of it. The first is that we have a legacy of Western culture, which poses very serious problems. And the main one is this dichotomy between spirituality and science. And after that, Astadi gave a wonderful short summary of the essence of what Sri Aurobindo has contributed about consciousness. And then wonderfully, Alok added to that two other elements. And one is that we have this fantastic technology at our disposal. And as the other half of the story, that we do not really know who we are. And that we have to look at a much deeper level about at our own identity. So now when we talk about the influence of Sri Aurobindo, obviously an enormous amount of things have been happening during the last century. And it is tempting to attribute that to Sri Aurobindo. But I think it is as yet largely underground. It is not yet manifest on the surface. And I still hope that in the next 20 years or so, much more of it will come to the front. And science could be the core area where that's taking place. Because at the moment our society is still highly schizophrenic. The main knowledge system that we use is science, which is only objective and essentially manipulative. It goes only on the outside world, is interested in power, not in inner insight. And on the other hand, there is an enormous flow of spirituality and all on the periphery of society, kind of unofficially, privately. And I think the great challenge is to bring these two halves again together. And after the kind of sidetracked psychology, you mentioned it and then you said no time to talk about it, but that could be one area where the center of the fight has to be fought. Because science is our official knowledge system in the New World civilization. It is highly dominant in education, in government, everywhere. And psychology is officially the science of us, of people. But it has completely failed by focusing on the objective reality, where there is very little to be seen. And I think there the Indian tradition can really make a crucial contribution by showing how we can rigorously, systematically study consciousness, study identity, study the inner half of the story. And I'm very much looking forward to see in the coming 10, 20, maybe 50 years, how that inner story will come into the picture. And how science, with all its rigor, its efficiency, its sharing, its progressiveness, can start dealing with this inner half of the story. And that's my hope, and let us see what we can do about it.
I'm very glad to have my old friend Matthias on the table. And I'm glad he talked about psychology because I think something which he knows, but a lot of people here may not know. Binu knows, I'm sure. When Sri Aurobindo's work was first published in 40s, early 40s, there's so many facets. His work was in every field. But the first one that he wanted to go out and present it out under his personal direct supervision was psychology, which started from 1942. I was somehow connected with that work. That's how, as a young student, I knew about it. It was not his philosophy, which went out into the National Forum and the Indian National Conferences, and they had a very wide countrywide forum with all the leading philosophers from Dr. Radhakrishnan onwards. It was in the 50s. But in the 40s, the first he wanted to go out was psychology. And if you look today at the Western world, you know it very well. Their interest in integral psychology in Sri Aurobindo's is gaining in pace. So thank you for bringing this in.
We have few minutes. We can invite some questions if you have any.
Hello?
Hello?
Before I forget, I have a question to Matthias. You talked about the word consciousness referring to what Asta said before. And in your last sentence, you said what Sri Aurobindo has brought upon earth, we have yet to see its manifestation, and that it hasn't yet manifested on the surface. So I would like you to explain that or explore further what you mean by that, because if I understand intuitively what Sri Aurobindo means by that, it's already in the atmosphere of the earth, and it's there. It's just for us to link to it. Unless I have to scientifically prove in the terms of Western scientific theories and explain intellectually and mentally, then I don't know. I think there is still a danger for misinterpretation. And then coming to your next subject is, yeah, you said maybe India has to contribute somewhere. Maybe there is something. But then if it is again, if India has to prove through this scientific approach, and to prove it that you can really touch the surface and then feel, yeah, okay, we are safe and secure. I don't know, again, there's a danger for putting India into those very academic circles. And I hope we'll reach another level to understand these issues.
First of all, I didn't say that, at least I hope I didn't say, if I said it was a mistake, that Sri Aurobindo's work is not yet visible or not present or anything of this sort. Obviously it is. But I hope it will still get much more concrete and manifest, not only in the depths, not only in our feelings and our inner state, but also on the outside. As far as the second half of your question goes, the main change that has to take place in science is that the subjective assessment of things should be acknowledged. As you fully rightly say, to try to prove Indian ideas through the present materialistic Western science, that is turning the whole world upside down. Then you get people who use yoga to relax or to deal with the stress of society or to bring your blood pressure down. But that's not the purpose of yoga. The thing should be the other way, actually. It should be our inner consciousness that assesses what we can do with the outer knowledge. So the main change that has to take place is in our basic epistemology and from there in our methodology, at least for the inner sciences. Yeah? So what I foresee is a very radical change in the basic epistemology, at least of the social sciences. Because the social sciences at the moment are at a complete loss. They shift from one method to another method, from one school to another school. They clearly have not found their swabhav. They're stumbling around. And if they would accept that you can make your inner perceptions reliable if you do the proper exercises for it, then you can really develop a proper inner science. And that's what I'm looking for. But it would be a radical change, not a small introduction of yoga into schools or something of that sort.
Hello. This is not a question, just a comment on Astrade's criticism of religion. Yes, I join my voice against the word religion, but there is one place in the human cycle where Sri Aurobindo has equated religion with spirituality, and there he uses another word, religionism. So just to differentiate, he uses the word, perhaps in civilization and culture, he uses the word religionism to, as a synonym for religion, and religion for spirituality. There are times, I think, this is just an addition to your, I appreciate your criticism of religion.
Five layers, Annamaya Kosha, Pranamaya Kosha, Manomaya Kosha, Linganamaya Kosha, Anandamaya Kosha. First, allopathy is dealing with Annamaya Kosha. Then, second, Pranamaya Kosha, Pranayam and Yoga, like that, Pranamaya Kosha. Third one, homeopathy, this deal with Manomaya, psychology, everything. Next one is naturopathy, Linganamaya Kosha. But Anandamaya Kosha, what Aurobindo uses to us to get a very good body, no thoughts. We have to silence our mind and then we have to go to the beyond mind. We will get out of all problems. Light and sound, there are two things available. The science is going beyond light and spirituality is going on sound. So our mind is travel faster like anything. The light, with the help of science, we are coming to light phase. Our mind is coming down, and then we have to go to the sound waves, and then we have to silence that. If you do like that, the science and spirituality mingle together, and we can make wonders.
In our enthusiasm, we try to forcibly oversimplify things and bring science and spirituality together as if they are very simple things to be united just because we are passionate about spirituality. In evening talks, Sri Aurobindo cautions and tells very sternly tells that don't try to do that. Rather, you say it in a way that yes, certain conclusions of science matches with certain conclusions of metaphysics. Talk in that language. Don't try to, as if interpolate things which are based on different paradigms. And then if we see that he has used these terms, multiple unity, multitudinous unity, so many times. And in this third chapter of Life Divine, actually what Astrathi said was a very nice thing, that psychology would be providing the meeting ground of science and spirituality in today's age, where he has given a clear indication, Sri Aurobindo, in the third chapter, where he has said that the extension of our faculties of knowledge, which Srudalu was telling in the morning, that means our suprarational ways of knowledge like intuition, revelation and other things. If we can do that and we can go to the cosmic consciousness, bring that in psychology, then that will be the meeting point of science and spirituality. This is such a complex thing that first, when we talk about science and spirituality, we have to work upon ourselves, we have to bring and develop our own inner senses, develop our intuitive powers, which will not be something which is antagonistic to reason, but which is something surpassing reason. Intuition was there. If intuition was not there in the beginning, we couldn't have named so beautifully all our flowers, birds, and rivers everywhere in the world. We have such beautiful names. And this intuition was available in a much freer way, but it had to recede so that rationality had to come forward. Otherwise, there would be superstition, there would be a chaos. But after rationality has come to its pinnacle, then again intuition has to come back in a greater way, in a much glorified way. And then if you can develop that, and then go, as with the help of psychology, we go to the cosmic consciousness, then we can bring science and spirituality together. It is a very big and complex task. It is a home task that Sri Aurobindo has given us. And it's an adventure that we can all pursue. And there is so much nice directions we can give from Sri Aurobindo's perspective in this regard. And this is very important because all over the world, we are trying to oversimplify things and say, oh, because we love spirituality, we like, and we are Indians, we try to see that they are both together. As if when we say, we find something about electrons rotating, and we say that is monism, and spirituality, Vedanta, Vedas also speak of monism, and they are one. Like that we cannot prove. We have to work upon it. And psychology today is a gateway to spirituality. This also I am emphasizing, we are taking this point because when we, Matthias, me, Alok, we started working on psychology, Sri Aurobindo psychology, of course, the first inspiration is Ashwati's father, Dr. Indra Sen. Even before 1940s, it is in the late 1930s. Ashwati, that Indian Science Congress, he was the first person when he presented the paper Arch of Wholeness. That was in early 1940s. Huh. Yes.
The Indian Science Congress had a special session that was in 45.
45
But
is
in
Arch
fo-
for Wholeness.
No,
huh?
in 42, Sri Aurobindo had asked Nolinida to, Indrasenji was still at Delhi University at that time. He had asked him to write on integral psychology, and that was published in one of the ashram journals from Calcutta. That was the very first, but what I was saying in response to Matthias, that the first thing was on psychology. Philosophy came in the 50s.
Yes, yes. So this is a very important thing, and we should take this cue. We should develop psychology. You see, we had resistances when we started working. Many people told us, many philosophers have told me that psychology is not our cup of tea from the Sri Aurobindo's perspective. It's philosophy. How do you bring metaphysics into the practical way? But that is the challenge we have to do. That's the challenge we have to do. That this is something we have to work out. This is something of the future that he has left us. This legacy. You see, always he has left us some work to do. Like even in the Independence Day message, he has said that ways and means of common action have to be found out for unity. No, we have to find out that ways and means of common action. That means we have to work on economy, multiple citizenship, this, that. So always he has given us things to work on. Means this is also an answer to that question that somebody said, as if we just passively go on reading Sri Aurobindo and then everything is there. We don't do anything. So some conception is also there, but that is not. We have to work on things. And psychology is a gateway to spirituality and also for this integration of science and spirituality. Thank you.
I think I will now quickly summarize the whole discussion. It is true that the interface between science and spirituality is psychology. But today, psychology or the consciousness, which is the base root of all these things, is having an interface with the physiological functions. Because there is a neurological functioning, and the thoughts. So what is the relationship between the thought and its manifestation in a physiological functioning? What is the oxygen? What is the oxygen and how does it replenish our prana? What is the physical substance, the food that we take, and how does it replenish our subtle matter? These are the interfaces that science is looking after today. If we can find out, if we can break these veils of how thought manifests itself physiologically in neurological functioning, how prana is being replenished by our food or our oxygen in breathing exercises, and how our subtle physical gets replenished from the food. So because science is an external domain, the physiological functioning, the spirituality and psychology is again a inner domain. So if we can find out an interface between these two, if there is veil can be broken, then there will be a meeting point between the external science and the internal spirituality or psychology or whatever. This needs to be done, and there is a quotation of Sri Aurobindo that the veil will be broken and there will be an intermingling of the inner with the outer. So where science and spirituality or science and psychology can meet, these are the things we hope the future will develop. Thank you very much.